Welcome back, Flyers nitty-gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yuri Wallach, my partner in crime, as always, Vasily Giannarakos. How you doing, my friend?
Doing really well, Yuriv. We're back once again for another episode.
Yep.
And it's going to be a fun one. Lots to discuss. I was recently in Ottawa covering the Flyers versus the Senators. 5-2 loss, obviously, from the Flyers end, but a lot of insight to provide just being there on site and getting to watch the players in person. I always find, you can kind of really analyze their games a lot better when you're actually in the press box, which is like watching on TV. So it's great for that, and going to try to give you all some of that insight that I got on Saturday here. But yeah, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, dude. I'm doing well. Doing a lot better than I was last week. It was a kind of an emotional week. Again, I'm Israeli, so, we're not going to talk any politics on here at all, but it was, obviously an emotional week for me. I was born there, so, I'm very close to that situation. But I feel better this week, and, I'm ready to talk hockey, dude. We're finally into the swing of things, like you said, and I do want to, I hope you fill everybody in on a little bit of insight you got from the floor there. And I know one of our listeners said that they heard you in the post games, which is always awesome to hear. I loved hearing that stuff. I love hearing your voice or Jamie asking questions, stuff like that. Yeah, I'll actually be at the home opener as well, covering the game from the press box. So I'll be there for that home opener. We'll talk more about that in this game. Before we get started, though, just want to remind everybody to please like and subscribe to this video. Please like it if you obviously like it, but it is a humongous help to us. You can also hit the bell for notifications. Also, just to be aware, did get some new hardware. If you guys noticed that my camera is a little bit better. So hoping to get videos out prior to midnight with just faster processing speed and download speeds and whatnot. So hopefully that will improve that process. Already has, I would say, for the first episode. And then a shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steak. Still not open, but again, keep them in your hearts and minds for when they do open. And please go get yourself a Jim's Steaks. I believe they should be open. I would hope that they're going to be open soon for the Flyer season. But yeah, let's start with our first piece of news. And before we get into the game recaps, let's just do the nice little update that the Flyers released, which so funny, dude, that the Flyers did this, because over the weekend, I was literally just talking to my friends. We were talking about the Sixers, and people were asking me if the Sixers were actually going to do the Center City thing. And I'm like, I actually just think it was to apply pressure onto Comcast Spectacor to upgrade the building, because I've been in the Flyers locker room plenty of times at Wells Fargo, and it was old and dated. And the new look that they just released, I think, will help attract, because again, people need to remember this is a place of work, right? This is where people work. And if you have kind of like a dated old look to it, and you're trying to sell somebody who's coming new to the team, you want to show that this is a very expensive team with a big sports market, and the facility didn't really reflect that. If you guys haven't seen it, they did release a video on YouTube. They've released pictures on social media, but the Flyers upgraded, not just the locker room itself, but, kind of the surrounding rooms that all the players kind of work in, and the coaching staff works in, and kind of their pregame meal and all that stuff. But the new locker room looks super sharp. Love the color additions, the lights, the big new logo on the ceiling. Just looks a lot sleeker than before. It has more of a rounded look, where it was kind of a square prior to that. I just think they really deserve that, and to look like a modern age team. And it goes kind of with that new era of orange, where you can see that they are investing in kind of creating a revival here in Philadelphia. And I thought it looks awesome, and I can't wait to see the locker room in person at some point.
Yeah, the locker room and just the upgrades that they're making, I think it's definitely something that was warranted. As you said, I mean, personally, I've never been in the locker room, but I mean, you see pictures, you see videos, you've obviously been in there. Jamie's obviously been in there. I mean, there was a dated feel. If you're, comparing to other locker rooms in the NHL that have had upgrades, in the past couple decades here. So I think in general, it's just a good thing to do, right? Obviously, as a player, you're going to want to have the best facilities for yourself to be able to train, to be able to get prepared for games. So this helps them in that facet. And I think too, it's just time to change things. You have a new era coming in, and this kind of signifies that with everything happening with the new regime. And it's crazy that, I mean, it's in total with the locker rooms and just all the upgrades they've made to Wells Fargo Center in the past couple of years. I think it's about a $400 million overhaul of Wells Fargo in general. And something to note is that there's a lot of new NHL arenas that were built recently in the past decade that didn't even cost $400 million themselves, the actual
Great
buildings.
point.
So if you think about how much money Comcast just put into this to renovate Wells Fargo, to really upgrade it and get it on par with some of those other buildings that are newer, they really pulled all the stops out, and it just shows too another thing that sometimes renovations and updating an older building that could be even more expensive than building something newer, which is kind of crazy to think about, but it makes sense because it's always harder to renovate versus build from scratch. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. And funny how they were able to do that without Valerie Camillo here. Sorry.
it's a
Shouldn't be
great
taking
point.
shouldn't be taking shots. And I'm sure she was part of that planning. They plan that stuff way in advance.
Yeah,
But yeah, everybody should know I'm not a huge fan of her performance
I
here.
mean they executed without her, so there you
Yeah,
go.
yeah. But no, good work to the Flyers. I'm overall, I'm just kidding. Good work to the Flyers on doing that. I think it was a good move. And if you're really gonna start attracting talent, maybe obviously not this season, but I don't agree with everybody's 3 to 5 year timeline stuff. We could be looking at that next year or even potentially this year. I know everybody kind of scoffs at that idea, but there's a right trade available. I mean, this team is, it needs a top defenseman. You don't always draft those guys. They might be available. And the Flyers are clearing on cap space. They are going to do this, right? There are some other guys that are going to leave town over time, right? So they might have some time or have some money to bring somebody in. So, they're going to want to show off that locker room. They already brought in some new guys, right? I'm sure that was put on display when they brought in Stahl, right? They probably showed them, hey, look at what the locker room will look like. It's not done yet. They probably took them into the progress, and showed them some pictures of the final piece, right? So all of that I think is important, and good move from Comcast Spectacor, and I think it'll help them keep the Sixers in house too, right? We even saw that the entrances are different and whatnot to the building. We saw that in preseason, so I think it's a good thing overall. All right. Let's get into our recaps of the Flyers' first 2 games of the season. They were both kind of like night and day performances. But, we did kind of call that out last episode, if you guys were listening, that we talked about how a 1 o'clock game, a day after, with travel involved, is, sometimes a trap game. And I think the Flyers really felt that. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the Senators game. But, against the Blue Jackets, against Ivan Provorov's team, the Philadelphia Flyers looked damn good in that game. They had some really solid performances from several players. I mean, Travis Konecny walked away with 2 goals, a +2 in that game with just under 17 minutes. Sean Couturier was a +3 with an assist. He played almost 21 minutes. Scott Lawton had 2 assists, a +3. Who else had a big performance here? Oh yeah,
Carter Hart.
Carter Hart. Well, we'll talk about Hart in a second. Igor Zamula was a +2, 1 assist. Travis Sanheim was a +1. He played over 26 minutes of ice time that game, and also had an assist in that game. Nick Seeler was a +2. We can talk about his performance in the second game. And Carter Hart obviously was a .939 save percentage. He stopped 31 of 33 shots, and looked pretty damn good. He had that one kind of, had that one goal where, I think he probably want that rebound back early in the game. But after that, I think he really did a really nice job kind of shutting the door, and was a big reason why the Flyers kind of really handedly won that game. And obviously Joel Farabee started off with the first goal of the season, which I don't think I heard anybody guess, but it was a good game for Farabee too, with 1 goal, 1 assist, and then Cam Atkinson got his first goal of the regular season coming back. So overall, good way to start the season.
Yeah, it's definitely a good start for the Flyers in the season opener. I mean, I think if John Tortorella had his way and if he could dictate, okay, how's my team going to play on a night-to-night basis? If he could guarantee that the Flyers are going to play in a similar manner to how they played in that season opener, he would probably be pretty happy
Yep.
if he knew that the team would be able to replicate a performance like that. And it just shows, right? Like the Flyers, despite the fact that they got outshot in the first period there, 15-13, they essentially, took control really after that Konecny goal in the first period, right? Like after that goal, the momentum's in their favor. They outshoot the Jackets 14-9 in the second period, and they outshoot them 10-9 in the third period when the Jackets should really be pressing and should likely have more shots in a third period when it's your home opener and you want to make a statement and get a win, for a brand new coach as well, and Pascal Vincent. So for me, like that is definitely a recipe for success, like for the Flyers moving forward. A game like that performance in Columbus, just not, taking their foot off the pedal. Where in a sense, I think that's what they did in certain cases in Ottawa. A big part, I mean, of the win for them in Columbus was their special teams play. Though they went 0 for 3 on the power play, they stymied Columbus on the penalty kill, and that was a huge factor in the win. I mean, they went 4 for 4 on the PK. Even Sean Couturier mentions it in his post-game interview, saying that the penalty kill was really strong, and they fed off the momentum from the penalty kill, and that bled into their 5-on-5 game. So I think special teams was a big factor. Obviously, Travis Konecny is probably the player of the game for the Flyers there, just with the 2 goals. He was buzzing, creating a lot of chances. I did really like the Couturier Farabee combination there with Bobby Brink. They had some good looks and some chances. Obviously, the goal that Farabee scores and the give and go from Couturier is really good there. Another person to highlight, I mean, Sanheim had a good game as well in that opener. Just a ton of minutes. Also gets an assist. Played well. And then another person as well to highlight is Igor Zamula. He had some good outlets, made some good plays. Really good play to start the 2-on-0 essentially that Farabee and Couturier had, just with like a quick stick and then being able to get the puck up to them. So overall, I mean, for the Flyers perspective, that Columbus game is one they'd want to replicate moving ahead, in other matchups. Just, strong special teams, not defending a whole lot, and then being able to get some extended offensive zone time as well, which was a lot of things that they weren't able to kind of do in the Ottawa matchup.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll dig into that game in a minute here, but yeah, I totally agree. I think they played to their opponent. Again, Columbus is a team that probably is as good as the Flyers right on paper. They did lose Werenski through that game. Apparently, it's not a long-term injury, so that's good to hear. I still stand with Tortorella. I still don't even understand the fine.
It's not
I,
personally malicious, I don't
yeah,
think so.
I didn't get the fine. I mean, it was shoulder on shoulder contact. The leg looked like it was happenstance to me because it was against the
Yeah.
boards. But they felt it was a five. I'm okay with
Well,
the 2-minute penalty.
yeah.
Because a player got hurt, but you know,
$5,000 max fine for a play where Hathaway isn't very malicious and he's essentially just forechecking in that situation.
mhm.
It's interesting. I mean, obviously, you have to hope Werenski, recovers quickly. He's a great defenseman. Just for the game of hockey in general, you don't want great players out, and especially a guy who in Werenski was out essentially all of last season too, right? Like that's a tough one,
Yeah.
especially the season opener. I believe the injury is a quadricep contusion. So from what I understand, that's like a 2 to 3 week type of thing potentially. But you mean, who really knows at the end of the days? But hopefully quick recovery for Werenski. What I think it is too with a lot of these replays is the game moves so quick, such a fast pace. When these refs slow it down and you see the replay in slow motion, sure, it looks like he's sticking his knee out a little bit, but he has to plan himself with his skate to be able to deliver the hit, or else he's
Exactly.
just going to keep skating, right? So I think the slow motion kind of does a disservice to Hathaway because it looks like as you slow it down, oh, you know what, his knee does open up a bit and catch him, but he's not intentionally trying to do that. And Hathaway's never been known, Garnet Hathaway's never been known to be a dirty player over his
Yeah.
career. Like I don't think he's ever had multiple fines or multiple
That's why I
suspensions or
don't think it
anything
was
like that.
in-person hearing, right? It wasn't a
Exactly.
suspension type of thing, right? If it was really a knee on knee and it was intentional, he would have been suspended for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I don't like that stuff either, but I didn't see intent there. And I think if Werenski didn't get injured, I'm not even so sure they would have looked at a penalty there.
No, I think
Um,
the injury is a big factor. And then, I mean, Hathaway, even afterwards, right? Like the good guy that he is, he tries to apologize to Werenski as he's skating off the ice. So, like, if
yeah,
you're, if you're going to have intent to hurt somebody, you're not going to be doing that after the fact
yeah,
anyway. So,
yeah. All right, and let's go into the next game. So the Flyers did play a game over the weekend. That was the Saturday game against Ottawa. This game they just got spanked, like in almost every facet of the game. They didn't play, I wouldn't say nightmarish, but they finished with 21 shots. It's almost like surprising considering halfway through the game they only had, I think, like 11 shots or something like that.
he only had
Uh,
3 shots at 5-on-5 through the first, I think, like 35 minutes of the game or
Yeah,
something.
it wasn't a great performance, and like I mentioned earlier, and like we talked about in the previous episode, coming into that day game, with not much, with mostly travel time in between, and it being an early game, where Ottawa's at home, they looked much, they look like the rest of the team, and they played like a fresh team, a hungry
Yeah.
team. They do have a skill advantage over the Flyers. And Tortorella referenced that though. I'll be honest with you, I don't really like that he said that because that's almost irrelevant to me. Not because I don't think skill matters, but because I don't think that the effort and the precision on the ice and the execution has to do with talent, right?
Yeah.
The Flyers can still play well as a team and still lose that game. But they were never really even in that game.
They
They had
weren't they weren't supporting each other as a 5-man unit
right.
very often. So,
Yeah, no, exactly. And the fact they give up that late goal at the end of the period by Tkachuk with 5 seconds left. I mean, it really wasn't a good performance. But overall, Travis Konecny did have at least a good offensive performance. He had another goal and an assist, a 2-point game for him once again. He is on fire. He's got 3 goals and 1 assist for 4 points in 2 games. So he's continuing, and this is again what I was saying to people about how preseason is not the same thing. You notice Bobby Brink is being used less. He only played a little over 13 minutes last game. Like it's the people who thought that preseason performances were going to, kind of make their way into regular season. It's really not like that. And then the playoffs is a whole nother different animal. So I expected Travis Konecny to kind of pick up his offensive game. And he definitely has. So he had a big performance. Foerster had his first assist of the season. He did play 16 minutes of ice time, which is really good for a rookie. And if you look at it, he has 8 points in his first 9 games in the NHL. So, uh,
it's
the
pretty
guy
good.
the guy just keeps performing at the NHL level, especially the regular season. And then Noah Cates didn't have a lot of minutes, only just under 14 minutes of ice time. Sean Couturier did play 20 minutes of ice time. Sanheim did have an assist. He played just under 24 minutes. Talked about that too, how I didn't think they would really reduce his ice time. He was a -1, not his best game. He also took that penalty, which I don't think was a penalty. But then also had 2 minor penalties in that game. But one guy who did play well in that game on the defense, was Cam York. Looked pretty good all game. He played under 22 minutes a night, but he had 4 shots on net. He had that beautiful goal where the Flyers were able to respond after the Jake Sanderson goal. I thought Nick Seeler had his weakest game that I've seen in general and it showed. He only played 12 minutes that night. Emil Andrae did have 16 and a half minutes, so he was replacing Zamula in the lineup. Sean Walker did have a good game. He was a +1 with an assist, played almost 19 minutes a night. Again, a guy that most people counted out this season before they even saw him. People tend to do that here. I don't know why. You can ask them if they actually saw him play, and most of them didn't. So, and they already consider him garbage before they see him play. Again, it's a big attitude and why this podcast exists. We referenced the fact that he wouldn't be treated that way. He is a right-handed defenseman, and he had 4 hits that game as well. So, good performance from Sean Walker. Makes sense why he's been playing on the second pairing with Stahl. Stahl, I think, looked okay. And it shows that he probably will get rotated out of the lineup at some point. Same with Seeler. They're kind of the odd men out in all of this. And maybe we'll see some games with Andrae and Zamula playing probably as the season goes on. But I will say, I didn't see a great performance from Andrae, which I kind of expect. And this is what I was talking about, where I thought he, was better served starting off on the Phantoms to start the season. I still kind of stand by that. And when Ristolainen comes back, I wouldn't be surprised if he does go back. But I will say this too, playing against Ottawa in that type of game, it shows how much this team does miss Ristolainen. He is one of the better defensemen on this team. And without him, you're asking a lot more of a lot of other guys, and there is a trickle-down effect there. Carter Hart, I thought he played well enough. I think he had some of those that he could have saved. He had a .839 save percentage. He did stop 26 of 31 shots. I think he has better performance in him. I don't think it was necessarily fatigue with that, but I think the team in front of him they did not have their A game. We talk about all the time, when a team doesn't play well in front of you, it will bring a goaltender's numbers down. And again, it was a more talented team with better shooters, and it showed. What do you think?
Yeah, so obviously it's not the result the Flyers are looking for. They want to follow up on a strong opener and try to continue like some of that play from that opener into this game.
Yep.
Unfortunately, a lot of the things that made them successful in game one did not carry over to game two. And one thing I did notice is the Flyers in transition in the first period, they were a lot cleaner in terms of their zone exits. They were able to move the puck up ice a lot quicker in the first period and actually do so effectively in terms of the defense moving the puck to forwards who could then enter the offensive zone and help the Flyers try to sustain a little bit of pressure offensively. Whereas, going forward, second period, third period, their ability to outlet the puck up the ice was just non-existent. Like, they were getting pinned a lot in their own zone. Defensemen were having trouble making clean breakout passes to forwards, up the ice to try to transition the puck. And that's something you didn't see against Columbus. They were moving the puck.
Were huge too.
Exactly. They were moving the puck up a lot quicker in the Columbus game, and they were unable to do so in the Ottawa game. And a big factor in that is Ottawa's speed. Ottawa's a lot quicker of a team than Columbus is, and they made the Flyers pay. And what that essentially means is the Flyers just didn't have as much time as they did in the opening game to make those passes, right? You have to make those passes in a quicker manner when you have a quicker team forechecking against you, because there's simply just not going to be as much time for you to think and make a pass, with those speedy forecheckers of the Senators coming into play. It's funny, actually, because when you think of Andrae, he had his first shift of the game like very early on, like maybe 19 minutes, 18 minute, 30-second mark. So about 2 minutes in. And it's hilarious because I was going to tweet out that his first shift was really good. He actually like made a really nice clean outlet pass to get the puck up the ice. The Flyers start to forecheck. He actually gets a shot through, which is the Flyers' first shot of the game. And then the Senators turn things around. They get back into the offensive zone for the Flyers. They get the puck below the goal line. Andrae tries to rim the puck out. It gets stopped by the Ottawa player. They send it right back down. And then he goes in for the puck and then gets absolutely leveled by one of the Ottawa forecheckers. And then they score right after that. So it just shows how things can quickly change for you in the NHL, right? Like, you can start your shift off with two really nice plays and then end it off with two really bad plays, and it ends up in the back of your net. Yeah. And that's kind of the patience we have to have, I think, this season with a lot of the rookies and a lot of the younger players, right? There's going to be There's going to be, certain shifts where a younger guy like Andrae will make two really good plays, and then two really bad plays could end up in the back of the Flyers' net. And it's not to say that, they're plays that he can't learn from. I just think that, you're not expecting the speed of the NHL level yet for him. And that's probably why the AHL, I think, starting off there, especially only playing 10 games at the North American level, might have been beneficial for him. Mm-hmm. I think you can see, like, in his first game, that there's certain things not overwhelming him, but just the game is moving at a faster speed than he was previously used to, at the AHL and the SHL. But kudos to him, because he did rebound after that and make some good outlet passes throughout the game. But like you're saying, right, I would, yeah, exactly. That's one of his major strengths, and that's one of the reasons why the Flyers are so intrigued in his game. It's because he could do a lot of things that some of their defensemen cannot. But I think you're correct, right? Like, once Ristolainen kind of comes back into the fold here, I would expect him to be the odd man out. And then just, for the rest of that Ottawa game, essentially the Senators kind of take control from the second period onwards. They just pile the shots on in the second period, 12-4. The Flyers do get more shots back, in the third period and actually beat the Senators there with 12-6. But at that point, the game was kind of long out of reach. The Senators just had a lot more offensive zone time and a lot more puck possession. And, when you're a team that was defending as much as the Flyers were in that game, it's hard to create your own offense and get things going the other way. And that's essentially what occurred and was the backbreaker, really. And I did think, that after that Jake Sanderson goal, what I thought was, okay, now it's 3-1. Let's see how the Flyers respond, right? They're down 2 goals here. They respond right away with the Cam York goal. Great play by him. He flies up the ice and really nice, quick release for the wrist shot to beat Anton Forsberg. And I thought after that, okay, you see the team respond, that could be a big momentum builder, right? Because you just get scored on, but then you as a team are thinking, well, you know what, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep pushing. And they did try to do that with the response, but they couldn't follow up. And I think that late goal, obviously, first off, you never want to give up a goal in the last minute of a period. That's a huge
last 5 seconds.
Yeah, so that's a huge deflator for any team. For it to be with 5 seconds left, that's a backbreaker, right? Like they probably go into the locker room and they kind of realize, you know what, like this one might be a little bit out of our grip here. Versus going in 3-2 in a period where you got significantly outplayed, you'd probably have a whole different mindset saying, you know what, we're probably lucky for it to be 3-2, but we could still etch a point out of this if we just have a strong period and score 1 goal. Whereas 4-2, it kind of switches up a lot. And on that play in general, it's unfortunate for Sanheim because I thought he was having a pretty decent game at that point. And he makes a good play to initially retrieve the puck and kind of block a pass. And then, Giroux, obviously, just great stick, as we've known for watching him his whole career, and just great offensive awareness to realize, okay, there's still 5 seconds on the clock. I could still make a play here with Tkachuk in the slot. And he strips Sanheim with the stick lift and is able to feed Tkachuk there in the slot, who rips it past Hart. But for Sanheim, I think it's just something like, it's just a goal that you can't give up. It's a mistake you can't make. And he realizes that himself. I got to ask him, what did he think about the special teams that take away from the momentum? And he even said, I wasn't really sure that if it's the special teams, but I think it's just that 4-2 goal that we led with 5 seconds left. He said it's just a backbreaker and just took all kind of the wind out of the Flyers' sails, essentially. And then from the third period onwards, you could kind of see how that affected the team, right? They just didn't seem to have that same jump. They weren't really able to get back into forechecking or really getting much offensive pressure. Then Brady Tkachuk scores a power play goal as well, pretty early into the period. And the penalty that occurs for Sanheim really shouldn't have been a penalty. They're kind of just skating backwards, him and Shabbat, and they collide. So I'm not sure why that was really a penalty. Overall, the officiating in that game was pretty bad from somebody who was there live and kind of seeing it. Like the Couturier penalty for boarding, that's just a forecheck. That really shouldn't be a penalty. If you're not allowed to do that, can you even forecheck in hockey anymore? That's my perspective on it. So overall, the refs, you never want to blame the referees, but they definitely didn't help the Flyers, but they didn't help the Senators either. There were some calls on both teams' end that probably should have been called in general.
They definitely didn't lose because of the referees, right? Like it wasn't that type of
realistically, Yariv, I just want to point out, like, it's the special teams that burn the Flyers, right?
Yeah,
like they just can't get a kill. When any team's going 3 for 5 against you on the power play, you're likely going to lose. It just is what it is. And the Flyers went 1 for 6, right? Like if the Flyers go 3 for 6 here, and they get 1 penalty kill, it's a tie game, right? So like they just couldn't capitalize on their own power play. They
was
didn't
their problem
follow up
last year.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to hope that doesn't continue. It's still early in the season here, but even Tortorella mentions that, right? I asked him a question in the post game saying, did you feel like the special teams play took away from the 5-on-5 momentum? And he specifically stated that, we can't sit in the box as much as we did against a skilled team like Ottawa, which is 100% true. You have Tim Stützle, you have Claude Giroux, you have Brady Tkachuk, you have Jacob Chychrun. That's very talented, power play group to be giving 5 opportunities to on a night. So they obviously don't want to do that. And then he even mentioned too, which I totally agree with from watching, that the power play sucked the momentum out of their game. They'd have some decent shifts. They get a penalty called against Ottawa, and then not able to really set up properly on the power play. And when they did get set up, they weren't really able to create much chance. I think there's a lot of too pretty with the passing plays. Like you saw the 5-on-3 goal, what happened? They just shot the puck, rebound in front, and that's kind of what the team needs to do, right? Like they don't have that skilled, power play quarterback who's a huge, point producer on the power play, but they do have some good shooters in Tippett and Foerster, where I think, the move should be, let's utilize these guys, get them to start ripping the puck on net and see what we can create from our rebound chances. But yeah, right. Like just the special teams really sunk them in this one. Tortorella kind of agrees with that sentiment. One thing I did want to mention that I thought was real interesting that I saw kind of heading down to the locker room is after the game, I saw Keith Jones was actually having a discussion with Travis Sanheim off to the side. And I thought that was really interesting just to see walking into the locker room and just getting ready for the post game there, because I don't think we would have saw the previous regime or the president or see, like, I don't think we would have saw the previous regime going down and talking to a player like that after a game. Obviously, Sanheim had a rough game, so it just shows how involved this management staff is to go down after the game, and they're talking to their number one defenseman essentially here in Sanheim, and I'm assuming Jones is trying to probably say to him, "Hey, like this is one game, something you got to forget." Who knows what the conversation is? But just to see that, it just shows the mindset from this regime. They're not sitting back; they're proactive. Whereas this, the previous regime, I don't think we would have saw Chuck Fletcher get down there and talk to Travis Sanheim about his game after a loss like that.
Definitely not, and definitely not Scott, right? Dave Scott definitely would have been involved in that. He wouldn't even have anything to say to him.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a great breakdown. I totally think special teams played a huge role in this game. And I really do think it was a fatigue factor, and just to add support to that, the Flyers canceled their morning skate for tomorrow's game. And yeah, it's an hour earlier. For those who are not aware, they moved the game up to 6 p.m. probably to avoid the Phillies. And that makes sense. But at the same time, I think energy is a big part of hockey. You want to go in fresh, and I think the team needs to make sure they keep their energy levels high. And I think that's why that decision was made.
Yeah, especially for a home opener, right?
Yeah, so. Exactly. You want to come out with a lot of energy in that game, and I think the morning skate is kind of an antiquated thing. It was about keeping your legs fresh and all that. But, just from me being somebody who trains all the time, there is a cost to every single one of these things that you do. So you really want to conserve energy and just have them be able to come out for the game itself. We also should mention that Giroux was honored for his 1,000th point in Ottawa. And obviously, we're playing against Giroux now, but, I absolutely love Claude Giroux. Not that surprising. He hit 1,000 points. It's just cool to see that he's still continuing his success. Again, a part of me still wishes that it was here rather than, in Ottawa. But we did get a nice return with Tippett and a first round pick in theory this year, assuming that Florida doesn't tank, which I don't think they will.
They're not looking too hot right now, though, Florida.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's good from a Flyers perspective.
Well, it depends on where they finish, right? If they finish below 15, well, we get screwed, and then we get the pick
that's
next
true.
year. So we don't want them to tank. We want them to be kind of in that middle range. But yeah, still pretty cool for Giroux. Anything to add there?
Yeah, it was great to see that ceremony. I was kind of puzzled. I had a tweet about it, and a lot of fans, were commenting saying this isn't even on TV, like on NBC Philly. You'd think it'd be something that fans would want to see, but I'd imagine it being an away game, it's kind of something hard to capture. I believe on the Canadian side of things, like the Canadian broadcast, which was Sportsnet, they did have the ceremony televised, which makes sense. I mean, Claude Giroux is one of the best players over the last couple decades here, so that's obviously something that the league's going to want to have televised. And it's just a great moment for Giroux, right? I mean, 900 of those points came with the Flyers. He's mainly a Flyer. When he retires, he's going to be thought of as a Philadelphia Flyer, right? Not an Ottawa Senator, first and foremost, I would imagine. So it's cool for him to get the honor against his former team, because there's no guarantee that he would have got it, right? It was all contingent on him getting 2 points in that first game for the Senators. So it's kind of cool that he gets to have it against his former team and gets to have, some guys that he's played with for a long time congratulate him, and Sean Couturier and Scott Lawton. Even some videos, right, from like Briere, who played with him in the past, Travis Konecny, even Konecny saying during the intermission, Giroux taught me everything I know. I think it was just kind of a cool thing for them to do. And just, a great thing, obviously, for Giroux in his career. Just shows, how much of an impact player that he's been for all these years, and he still is. It's kind of crazy that I think to start the year now, he's got 5 points in 3 games. So, he's still putting up point per game numbers, obviously, and we saw that with his production last season. So he just
Yeah.
doesn't slow down, and it's not surprising to me
Yeah.
to see him continue to perform at
Not
all.
even a little bit. I don't know why people thought that was going to happen with him. He is, I'm not saying he's a generational player, but for the Flyers, he's an all-time great, and they
Yeah,
don't die out quickly. He's not Wayne Simmons. Wayne
no,
Simmons, very different type of player. This is a guy who probably will continue being good until the day he retires.
yeah,
And people will probably see that and
and
think he even has a little left in him.
when you're playing, on a team like the Senators, you have so many like younger skilled players. It only makes sense that the production rises, right? Versus like what he
Totally.
was putting up his last season with the Flyers, where he doesn't have that same skill surrounding him. So,
Yeah, playing on a regular basis for sure. And he was a big part of the win that they had.
oh yeah,
So let's just talk a little bit more about Travis Konecny. Again, I mentioned 3 goals, 1 assist in the first 2 games. I will say, like, I don't think defensively he's played as well as he did last year. Again, it's just 2 games, but offensively he's on fire and showing that he's still the driving offense. Now, Tippett hasn't produced yet. I think these lines will change. I've mentioned it over and over again. We'll see more changes in the lineup. Especially with this upcoming game, which we'll announce that news in a second. But, good to see Travis Konecny kind of continue where he left off. And I do expect him to be, again, one of the top producers in the league. Do you see that?
yeah. So for Konechny, I mean,
Health,
it's a great,
barring health.
yeah, yeah, it's a great start for him. I mean, last year was on I believe before he got the big injury, he was like on an over 90-point pace. And with the start here, he's kind of finishing right where he left off, right? Like he's got 4 points in the first 2 games here. He looks, like the same player that last season, and he looks like somebody who is capitalizing on the chances that he's getting, right? Like in these opportunities in previous seasons, I think what the problem was is he'd get a lot of chances, but he wasn't able to capitalize on them. Whereas now, most of the chances that he's getting, they're ending up in the back of the net. I think that's just a confidence thing, right? Like he knows
Mm-hmm.
himself that like I can score. I know where to put myself on the ice to get into those positions to have the chances to score. And I think him finishing as much as he did last season helps him going into this season because he knows that, hey, like I have the talent and the skill to be a perennial 30 goal plus guy. And I mean, I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see him hit 40 goals this season whatsoever. I think the pace is already there to begun. Obviously, we'll have to see how it continues, and it's all barring health. But I expect another big season from Konechny, and it just shows kind of the progression that he's taken in his career. Because I don't think in the past he was ever a guy that you thought, okay, well he's the driver of this line. It would always be, well, he's with Sean Couturier who's driving the line, or he's with Claude Giroux who's driving the line. But the Flyers, if you look at the past, few games in the lineup here, they have him on the third line that you would pencil in, right? Like with Cates and Lawton. And you can say whatever you want about Cates and Lawton, like they're pretty decent offensively, but they're not, bona fide top 6 options. So the fact that the coaching staff has the faith and Konechny to say, hey, we're going to start you on this line with 2 guys that probably wouldn't be in the top 6 on most of the top teams in the league, but we are so confident in your ability to produce offense that we think you could do it with these 2 guys. So they basically are, putting it in Konechny's court to drive his own line this season, which he did do last season. But I think that's obviously a good sign that the coaching staff really just believes in him and believes in his skill set and what he can do on the ice. And I think he's proving everybody wrong who thought in the past that he can never be a 60 to 70-point guy continually or even more.
Yeah, because players don't fully develop until
And
their
before we get
late
into our
20s.
next topics, actually, I just wanted to touch on, Frost and Tippett, actually, because they were kind of 2 players that haven't done too much in the first 2 games, but I think it's something not to panic, right? Like you saw Frost make a really nice move on one of the Ottawa defenders
Late in the
and
game.
gets
Yeah.
robbed by Forsberg late in the game. So you're starting to kind of see him come to life a little bit with that. And Tippett, I just think he needs to get the puck on net more. Like he had 9 shot attempts in the Ottawa game. Only I think got 1 or 2 of them on the net out of the 9. And then even in the first game, I think he had 7 shot attempts and once again only 1 or 2 on the net. So I think for Tippett to be effective, it's just like once you start seeing the puck hit the net more because he has such a lethal shot, you'll start seeing more of the shots go in. But I expect both of them will pick it up as we go along.
Totally, and it's got to be remembered that they moved into the left-hand side. I honestly could see a situation where he moves back to the right and they move Cam Atkinson over to the left side at some point too, who has experience
Yeah,
playing on that side also. And just
especially to sorry to cut you off, Rue, but especially too if Tippett, they see that he's continuing to struggle. Like maybe it is a
right,
lot harder for him to get adjusted on the left side than they thought, right? And that could
right.
be it because if you've played right wing your whole career and now they're just putting you on an offside, right at the NHL level, people can think whatever they want. Oh, it's just a wing, it's just a wing, but it really changes a lot of the way you play and a lot of your instincts
Yep.
in
And
retrieving pucks. So
the angles in which you're shooting too.
yeah.
No, totally. And good points there. So next we wanted to talk a little bit about Foerster and Brink. We already did kind of mention this, but I think overall they both had pretty good first performances. I think Foerster really just, I think he even mentioned in his post-game interview that he kind of this is something I didn't like about the Flyers in the second game. They passed up shot opportunities to try to look pretty, and it was a big reason why they didn't get enough shots on net. I think they need to stop doing that, especially early in games, to just always shoot when you have an
They need
opportunity.
to fire the puck. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a shooter. You're a shooter. Shoot the puck, dude.
He said that himself. So
Yeah, exactly. But I think not a bad start for the two of them. I mean, Brink played pretty well, not like lights out like he was in the preseason, but I expected that. And I thought Foerster had a pretty good game, outside of that one mistake. So, pretty good start for the rookies.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I thought Brink made some, a few plays in the opener. I think he was, making more plays in the preseason, but obviously, as we said, right, the preseason, the regular season are going to be completely different in the sense that you're going to have less time and space, in the regular season versus the preseason. I think we saw that a little bit with Brink. Like he was trying to make certain plays and he was getting closed on a lot quicker. I did think Foerster had a pretty solid game. Like he did have one mistake, like you said, where he had the opportunity to take a shot, turns it over, has to back check, and then on that play takes a penalty as well. That's obviously something you don't want to see because you basically cause yourself to take that penalty due to not taking the shot. If you just
Right.
shoot the puck at that point, that whole play doesn't occur. And then Ottawa doesn't get that power play opportunity. One thing I was kind of interested about is I'm sure the coaching staff had this decided beforehand that they were going to rotate, the second game. Like they were going to take, Zamula and Brink out no matter what, and Foerster and Andrae are going to get a look no matter what in Ottawa. Like they probably had that set up in their minds. I just thought it's a weird thing to see the Flyers change their lineup after a win. It's typically something you don't see John Tortorella do often. So it must be something that they had pre-planned,
Definitely.
right?
Definitely.
So they planned it. I tried to get some insight for everybody here. Like I want to see what Tortorella would say. So I asked him about, what his thoughts were on, getting Foerster and Andrae in, and does he, believe that he'll continue the rotation as it moves along. He essentially said the team's going to review some tape and they're going to see and make a decision on how they handle it going ahead. So here he didn't really give much insight, but I wonder, if the rotation will continue going forward here. Yeah, I think it's going to really, with the defenseman, I wouldn't expect it as much. I think once, like we said, right, like once Ristolainen comes back, we probably see Zamula stay up, and then Andrae gets sent back just due to the waiver exemption, everything kind of in play with that. But with Foerster and Brink, like I do wonder, like when do they stop the rotation? Like are they going to keep rotating for the first kind of 5-10 games here, and then whoever plays better off that sample size? Like what's going to happen with that? Because I do think it takes away from a player, like, getting taken out of the lineup, back in the lineup, like you can't find a rhythm. So I just think for both of their games, it's not the best thing to do.
Yeah.
Personally.
Well, and I said this earlier. I mean, there's no reason that Nick Deloria has to play every single game.
Yeah.
So while they like that fourth line, again, if a team is not winning, especially, they make changes. And, I could totally see a situation. But, with the update we have in a little bit here, we probably know the answer to the Brink Forest.
Yeah. And then one last thing to touch on, Yuri, for Foerster is I thought that on the power play in that game, he looked pretty good. Obviously, he gets the assist. But I just thought versus the preseason, I feel like in the preseason, he was standing still a lot, kind of waiting for that one-timer. Whereas, on Saturday, I felt like he was moving a lot more and rotating in and out of spots, trying to find open ice more. And I think, as we've seen in the modern day NHL, the more movement on a power play, typically the better the power play is. When you're standing still and you're telegraphing passes, it's pretty easy for a team to understand what you're doing.
Yeah,
exactly.
Keep you on the outside and just take away the passing lanes. most teams can do that all night. So it's a great point. Yeah, so Zamula and Andrae, we talked about them as well. Zamula had a really strong first game, so I do expect him to kind of come back in the lineup. I thought, again, I think you did a good job breaking down the Andrae thing. I don't think we really need to go through too much of that, but from what I understand, Ristolainen is still not practicing with the team and still skating, so I do expect Zamula to get in on this home opener. I assume you're kind of in the same boat that
Yeah.
I am.
I think it'll be Zamula who draws back. And I personally don't think he should have been taken out after a really strong performance against Columbus. I thought he played actually really well. Obviously, like I said, they had their minds made up. They wanted to get Andrae in there, which there's nothing wrong with that. And I think it's a good learning experience for Andrae because he gets a taste of that NHL action, even though he got preseason games. As we said, it's not
Not
even
the
close to the
same.
same. Like you see the intensity ramp up, and you saw Andrae get a little bit overwhelmed, right? Just in some of his decision making and how fast the pace of the game is. So I think it's beneficial for him to understand this is what it takes, right, to be a defender at the NHL level. This is the pace that it's going to be. And he can understand that now, once Ristolainen gets back and he eventually does go down, which we kind of expect here, and he'll be able to kind of apply that to his game in Lehigh and understand, well, for me to, be effective at the NHL level, I'm going to have to be making these plays a lot quicker than I was maybe in the SHL, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's a good learning experience for him. And we'll see, Andrae, obviously there's no official word on what's going to happen with him, but when he does eventually go down here, I think there'll be, we'll see him back quickly. I think there's always going to be injuries and you never know what's going to happen. So I would expect him to get, a lot of NHL time this season, as we said, in previous episodes, no matter
Yeah.
what goes on here.
And Zamula's a couple years older. I mean, he's only 23 years old, but Andre's 21 years old.
He's a
It's
young defenseman. He's in that
yeah,
development phase. So
right. Yeah, I mean, and again, even Cam York is older than him by a year. So, it's like, he's still pretty young. So it's not, it's not a case where you should be kind of counting this guy out or expecting him to be lights out. Defensemen take time. So he needs to see that speed, size difference of the NHL and kind of prepare for it.
mhm.
And then I guess we'll mention a little bit of Sanheim and York. We talked a good amount about Sanheim, but York, I think, looked good in both games. I think by the end of the season, he might be the team's best defender. He definitely looked like it in the second game. Even though he didn't play as many minutes as Sanheim, he was strong pretty much all game. I didn't see any huge errors from him or anything like that. I think he's been a lot more physical this year as well. Looks stronger, like more as a man. Again, he's only 22 years old. And you did mention the Flyers don't have a defenseman who can do that. I really think York is developing into that defenseman. We saw that with that goal of a defenseman who can kind of run a power play, and I expect him to be the number one defenseman on this team until they bring in somebody who is, a clear-cut number one guy. But I really like what I saw from York. I mean, Sanheim kind of broke down already, but I really like what I saw from York so far. And I haven't seen any bad performances out of him at all, actually, including the preseason.
Yeah, he's looked good. I mean, other than that Devils game where the whole team sucked pretty much to start that preseason,
Yeah, true.
he's looked pretty good. Not really many turnovers, making some good outlets as like that's, typically what his skill set kind of brings forth, right? A guy who can really pass the puck well up the ice, can find those lanes for his teammates. I think one thing to note is you haven't seen him look overwhelmed at all, right? Like he's
Yep.
basically playing in a top pair role, but he looks very calm out there, collected. He's not panicking like when he's trying to outlet the puck, even though there's, he's getting pressure and typically playing against these top lines of the other teams at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you hit the nail on the head, Reeve. Like he's looked really good to start. So it's an encouraging sign for York. I think he'll definitely be able to build upon it as we go along and continue to develop his game because he's still a young defenseman here. Like it's not the finished product that we're seeing right now. And he's
Totally.
playing already really well. So it's a
Yeah.
good sign for the Flyers to see that.
Yeah, it's a great sign. And again, he's a huge part of this future, and he's only 22 years old, and he's going to be playing, number 2 minutes probably all season long behind Sanheim. And we'll see what kind of pairing he's on, right? I think when Ristolainen comes back, they might separate Sanheim and York.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to go with
But
that pairing all season. Go ahead.
To your point about Ristolainen and just them in the defensive zone, especially against Ottawa, I think they really missed Ristolainen. And the reason
The
being is,
physicality.
yeah, the physicality, because we talked about it all off season, right? Like this defense does not have much of a physical makeup to it. Like you do have Nick Seeler, you do have Mark Stahl, but those guys aren't the quickest of foot. I mean, Ristolainen, I would say, is a lot quicker than them, easier to get to, pucks on the boards, retrieve pucks, and he's just so big too. Like, I think that plays a huge factor in the Flyers just getting hemmed in their own end pretty much
Yep.
most of the game against Ottawa. They don't have Ristolainen who could really help them exit the zone just in breaking up some of those, plays on the boards and winning some of those battles that they typically, would probably or that they lost in that game, basically.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Adam Yinning a little bit, but I do think he is a potential call up as well at some point. A guy who is big and strong and in the
Has
way.
those physical traits, yeah.
Right, exactly. And they're going to need more of that, especially. I still stand by the fact that I don't think that Stahl and Sealer finish the season on the Flyers. So
Yeah.
I think Walker probably will, but Stahl and Sealer are easy guys to replace for this organization, at least on the ice. Maybe not in the locker room, but on the ice. And if they're, even somewhat outside of a playoff spot, I could see the team moving on from both of them just to try to get some, the third, fourth round picks for them. So we did talk about Sean Walker a good amount, but he did play very well. In both games, I thought he looked strong. Maybe a guy who will be in that top four. I could totally see Walker and Sanheim being a pairing as we move forward here, especially when Ristolainen gets back. And Torts praised him all preseason, and a lot of people counted him out, but it doesn't look like a guy to count out, and he has another year left on his contract. I suspect the Flyers might get trade offers for him too. And maybe they do move on from him. He's not that old or anything, right? I think he's a year older than Sanheim, if I'm.
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, he's 28 years old, so he's not that old. And again, you can always trade him next year too.
And I think his contract is either like 2.3 or like 2.6 million. Yeah. So it's nothing too crazy. If a team really thinks that he can benefit, like he'd be a benefit for them in a playoff situation, I could totally see it.
I just can't see the Flyers. Like, I could see the Flyers eating 50% of his contract in a trade, but I don't see them doing that with another year left on his contract. Maybe it'll be less. Maybe it'll be 20%, of his contract or something like that. But I think they'd probably rather keep him for another year because he's not very expensive and he's showing.
And he's a good veteran.
Yeah, he's showing he can at least play number 5, number 4 role on this team.
Well, it's clear that the coaching staff trusts him, right? Like he got 1849 of ice time in the first game, and then I think the second game. Let me pull it up here, but he must have got
similar.
18. He must have got something similar. Let's see. So he had 1955, even more ice time in the first game.
First game. Yep.
Yeah, so he had a good amount of ice time, and the coaching staff obviously trusts him to be out there for a good portion of the game, playing basically 20 minutes in the first game, 1955, 1849 in the second game there. So it's encouraging to see that they have another guy they could give some minutes to here, especially when you have Mark Stahl and Sealer on the defensive core, who are guys that probably should be playing 12, 13, 14 minutes a night in a third pair role. You're going to need to have another guy that you can at least give 15 minutes plus. I thought Walker is just really smooth in kind of everything he's doing out there, in the sense that there's no panic to his game, but he's a really fluid skater. Can move the puck up the ice quickly. Has a good first pass. And he activates quite a bit in the offensive zone. Like we saw him, he wasn't afraid to drop down low with the puck and try to get the puck into the crease and into the scoring areas to create. So, with the Flyers kind of being a blue line, when you look at it, like there's not a ton of offense that's going to be coming from the back end this year. That's an element they need, right? They need guys that can move the puck. They need guys that, can skate up ice with the puck. And Walker has, all those elements to his game. And I think something for him is you haven't really noticed any real big egregious mistakes, real big egregious turnovers, or being like super out of position yet. And I think that's obviously something that is a good sign, right? You want a defenseman that could be steady and solid for you. I say this all the time. If you're a consistent NHL defenseman and you're playing in that, number 5, 6 role, or even, potentially like the lower end of a number 4, the less you're noticed, less, people see you on the ice can sometimes be a good thing, right? Like
Right.
not getting noticed, just playing that quiet, steady game. That's what you want to see from a defenseman in that type of role. I think he's been providing that to start. So it will, it'll be interesting to see how he kind of follows up as the season goes along. He can continue to play because obviously, he had similar sentiments in LA, but his last season in LA wasn't as good as prior seasons. Maybe that's due to the injury and rehabbing the injury. So we'll kind of see if he can
Most
bounce
likely.
back a bit this year, right?
Yeah, and the one thing I noticed here, is that Zamula only had just under 14 minutes of ice time in the first game, even though he played well, and Andrae had 16 plus in the
Yeah.
second game. So I wonder if that's just because of the way the team was playing. But I do think it's a little strange that Zamula played so well and didn't play and played the least of all defensemen in that game. So something to
Yeah,
keep
it
an eye
is.
on also. Um, okay. So this is the update. So the Flyers are slated to play Vancouver in their home opener. Again, I'll be at that game, and we just had some news come out that Sean Couturier will most likely miss the home opener. And according to Tortorella, it is not related to the back injury, and he's a little banged up. Most people will go straight into panic mode here. Clearly, not the news we wanted to hear, and obviously for the home opener, it's a huge bummer. But, we had this moment with Cam Atkinson who missed the game, and everybody kind of jumped on that too. But, all we say is don't panic. Right now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to miss a significant amount of time. We don't know what kind of, banged up, we don't really know what that means. But it does kind of suck. The Flyers are already down Couturier and Ristolainen, and that's a lot of size that this team just lost, for that home opener. Vancouver's not the strongest of teams. So it is, at least in that respect, it shouldn't hurt them too much. But obviously losing Sean Couturier, a guy who played exceptional in his first game back, and then still is played 20 minutes a night against Ottawa. It's going to be a big loss for the team. And we were talking about earlier with Brink and Foerster. Let's be honest here; they're probably both going to play in that home opener. Scott Lawton will most likely shift into the middle to play a center position. We don't know exactly what those lines will be like at this point, but I suspect that at least it'll give the opportunity for Foerster and Brink to play in the game. So look for the lines to change already. And this is something I was talking about. Do not like everybody who freaks out about opening night lineups. It's like it's almost completely irrelevant to
They
get.
usually change
Yeah,
quickly.
they will change, and the lines will change even more, especially by the end of the season. And even like I could see a case where Tippett gets shifted next game. Who knows? Like there's going to be changes, and we don't know who Frost is going to play with now, right? That
Yeah.
Couturier is out, or
Well,
or Noah Cates. Go ahead.
something to mention, I mean, especially in terms of the lineup, Tortorella had the blender out in the third period
Right.
against
He
Ottawa.
already
Like
changed it up.
he
Yep.
was already changing the lines where he had like Tippett, Couturier, and Atkinson. Then he had Frost, Farabee, and Forster, and then he had like Lawton, Cates, and Konecny, and even Konecny was moving up to play with Couturier at points. So like we always say, right? Like the lineups are always going to be subject to change. It's a long season. In terms of the Couturier injury, it's really unfortunate, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the last thing you want to hear from a guy that just missed 21 months straight. The silver lining is, it's not related to the back injury, so the team says. We'll have to obviously see what happens. Shout out to Jordan Hall. I believe he had the initial report of this. Essentially, what happened is following Monday's practice, Tortorella said Couturier was banged up. The head coach was stated to not be sure about the severity of the injury. When he got asked, if the injury was related to Couturier's back, he said no. And a direct quote from Tortorella which is a classic Tortorella answer, which is great. I thought it was very funny. I'm not going to give you the information, right? So you're wasting time asking those questions. Please go ahead, ask me another one. I
Yeah.
mean, I just thought, it's funny to hear him respond that way, but it is true, right? Like asking Tortorella about injuries, this has been his MO for years. Like he's not going to divulge much about his lineup. That's
Why
typically
would
what's
you?
going to happen. Exactly, because like you said, it could just be something that's getting blown out of proportion. This guy's been out for 21 months. Of course, the fan base is going to hear, "Oh no, Couturier's banged up. Oh my God, not again!" Right? Like that's going to be the reaction from most people. But as you said, right, Cam Atkinson's similar thing. Maybe he's just a little sore. Maybe they just want to hold him out for precautionary reasons, get the
Yep.
extra couple days of rest here, come back and play in the home opener, and we'll be fine, right? So it's definitely not something that you want to hear, but you have to hope from a Flyers perspective that Couturier isn't hurt long, and if he is out, it's a quick thing where he's kind of back by the weekend, because the Flyers. When you're missing, a top line center, it's never going to be a good thing for you just in your matchups. As we talked about, the way you're slotting your lineup, for it to happen, for him to miss any lengthy amount of time already to begin the season, the Flyers just back in the same situation they were last year, where they really don't have a number one center. And, if you don't have a number one center, you don't have a number one really defense pair. It's obviously not a good thing for the team in general. So it's not the way you'd want to start off. One thing that I did find interesting, Couturier plays 20 minutes, 39 seconds to start in the game against the Jackets. And I mean, the Flyers are in a close matchup there, so it makes sense you're going to want to play him that much. In the game against the Senators, I believe he plays 20 minutes exactly. And I'm a little surprised. And it's not surprising from the fact that, okay, like, why would you play Sean Couturier 20 minutes? Like, you could tell why. Tortorella wants to use him as much as he can because he's likely the best forward on this team, right? When you're looking at things, all things considered in terms of the defensive play, offensive play, just all around game, right? He's the most complete forward they have. He's an elite player just in terms of his defensive acumen. You got to see the offense get back to where it was, but there's a reason why Tortorella wants to play him this much, because it's going to help the team win when Sean Couturier is on the ice as much as possible. I do question though, the team's losing 4-2. They're are down 5-2 at a point. Like, why play him so much when you're losing in the losing environment? When he is a guy coming off of such a lengthy layoff here. What do you think about that? Just in terms of the ice time.
I mean, I always kind of assume, like, I think the precautionary thing, we talked about this before we went on, but like, I think the precautionary thing is the way we think. I don't think coaches really think that way. I think they try to win the game. So with me, it's like, I'm not really surprised that they went that route. And again, unless Sean Couturier says something to the coaching staff, which I highly doubt he did,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much expected because, in their mind, they're down 4-2. I don't think they're going out into that third period thinking, hey, let's kind of I think they want to lose 5-3 or 5-4, right? Like they're going to want to score till the very end just to keep momentum going. So, I think it would be wise to limit his ice time a little bit. But I'm not surprised that the coaching staff hasn't. And our coach definitely has, the next man up mentality. So even if somebody goes down, he's just going to shift his lines and expect the same from the team, But yeah, probably would have been smart to go a little more precautionary, but I never see coaches do that. So it just
I
doesn't
mean,
surprise me, I guess.
yeah, exactly, right. Like, from a coach's perspective, they're going to want to put out the best lineup and the best matchups they possibly can. So if Couturier is available and he said he's ready to go, like, they're not going to hold him back. I just wonder in that situation, like, you do think about it, like, did you really need him to get up 20 minutes in that third period? You probably could have, lessened a bit of the
Yeah.
time. But as you said, right,
Maybe even
like,
on the PK, like,
yeah, exactly. As you said, right, the coaching staff's looking to win, and they think of it as that's a potential thing up until the end of the game. So I am not surprised Tortorella is using him in that manner. I mean, he's a first line center, and they're using him like a first line center would be used. Before we move on to the next topic, I'll just mention like some of the lines from practice today.
I was just about to do that.
Oh, awesome!
Go
Reading each other's mind here.
go ahead.
So, the lineup for practice today, and this shout out to Jordan Hall once again, who tweeted this out. It was Konecny, Lawton, and Atkinson. So you see Lawton kind of shift to the middle here. Farabee, Frost, Brink, which I thought that's pretty interesting actually. Tippett, Cates, and Foerster. And then you have the PhD line of Delorier, Paling, and Hathaway. And then the D pairs were essentially the same from the game on Saturday. The only difference is Zamula rotating in, getting regular rushes versus Andrae.
I'll be honest, I actually don't like those combinations.
The line combos?
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Like, why would you put Brink and Frost on the same line? Why
Yeah,
would you put
it's
Tippett and
interesting.
Forrester on the same line? And then Konecny and Atkinson. It's just like a lot of doubling up what guys do. Where,
Yeah,
I would think, why not put Tippett with Farabee and Frost, a line that worked last year? Maybe try Brink, do Cates with Konecny and
yeah.
with with Foerster. That seems like a more balanced line. And then you could have Lawton with Brink and who'd I miss there? Atkinson, maybe,
Atkinson,
on
yeah.
the left-hand side. So I don't know. Just a thought in my head, but I'm good with whatever they roll with. And if they're seeing something at practice, I'll definitely go by their judgment. But I could see these lines also not being the case tomorrow. But look
Not
out
being
for
the
these.
actual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
look out for it to be the lines against Vancouver. It's still, it's obviously where the coaching staff's head's at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a fan of like you were saying. Like I thought Frost, Farabee, Brink is interesting just because I think there's going to be a lot of speed to that line.
It's kind of an
But
undersized line.
yeah, exactly. It's undersized, and you have two playmakers, and even Farabee, like he's a shooter, but he's not to the same extent as Tippett or Forster, who are just ripping it all the time, right? Like
Yeah.
Farabee will look to make more passing plays, so it's interesting. But like maybe, like I said, there's some sort of chemistry that they're seeing. I don't really like Lawton and Atkinson together.
Yeah,
I, but we'll see, right? Like it's early in the season, so I'm not going to make too much of a big deal over line combination, especially
yeah,
when
I agree.
who knows what the coaching staff really knows about Couturier's injury versus what they're saying. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Right.
they might know for a fact he's going to play on Tuesday, so they're just like, whatever, let's get Lawton in the middle here, and that would really be Couturier, right? And then Lawton would be like on a different line, for example. So who really knows? We don't have the insight, so it's hard to kind of say, okay, this is what the lineup's going to be. But if Couturier is out, I mean, we probably expect it to be something similar to this.
I just think it's weird not to rely more on Tippett since he was such a huge part of your offense last
Well,
year.
yeah, I have
And
something interesting to say about that. Is like I wonder, for Tippett and Frost, how it is, just in the sense that okay, they were the team's best offensive producers at the end of last year here, and they're really not getting used in the same manner. Obviously, you have some other guys coming back and connecting Couturier who are out kind of the end of the year last year. Obviously, Konecny does come back late, but he was out majority of the end of the season up to the final few games. So I just wonder from their perspective, like if that throws them off their game because they're getting a lot more offensive zone starts, a lot more offensive opportunities to end last season versus what they're getting right now. And they're also getting top power play time last year too, which they're not getting to begin the year here as well. So I wonder if that kind of, that stunts them in the sense that you're not getting as much ice, you're not getting as much offensive chances. So maybe that's why you see them not as involved because they're just not getting the opportunities that they were, right?
for sure. All right. Before we go into the second half, oh no, actually we have one more topic. So starting goaltender, we assume will be Carter Hart for the opener. Don't think that'll be any different for this one. They haven't announced it yet, but the fact that Carter Hart is the number one goalie, and you guys can see that there was a lot of controversy that was made up by the media prior to this. Again, I talked about it over and over again. I didn't see any of that happening, so I expect him to start his third game in a row. But I guess the question is, when will we see Sam Ersson? We have 2 games upcoming. Will he play against Connor McDavid? I could see it, or is he going to play against the Stars in their road game that'll be coming up the game after? Where's your head at with that?
My thought process is he'll play against the Stars because the Oilers, that's Carter Hart's hometown team. So they'll probably get Hart to play the Oilers there is my thought process. But obviously we'll see because they're not in Edmonton, right? Whereas like I think if they were in Edmonton, he was there in front of his family, they probably would for sure give the game to Hart. So
yeah,
who knows?
I think it depends on his performance too.
Yeah,
right?
but also yeah, it depends on the performance. Like I mean, if Hart goes in there and has a stinker for whatever reason, against Vancouver, they'll probably give him a break just because he started 3 in a row. You know what? Like, let's get Ersson in there and kind of freshen things up. I just would imagine you probably won't want to put a rookie goaltender in against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
Yeah, that's kind of
even though they trust in Ersson a lot. I think they believe he could probably handle that. I just don't know. Like, even though he's shown, that he's played really well at the NHL level and he has a good head on his shoulders and he can face adversity. I just think you're probably best not to put a rookie goalie up against 2 of the best players in the world to start a season, right?
Yeah.
Not to say that Dallas isn't, a really good team too, because they have some great offensive players and Rupai Hintz, Jason Robertson, and a really top team in the West there. But I just think McDavid's a tough one to go up against for your first game of the year. So
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
say we probably expect Hart, but you never really know how it's going to go.
No, I think it makes a ton of sense, right? Hart being the starting goaltender plays the first four, and then on that away game with the travel, right? Because you're going to be traveling into that next game, you're going to want to give Hart a break to some degree. So maybe you give him that he travels with the team, but he plays backup role in that one.
Mhm.
But we'll see. Well, I think we can throw logic at either direction. Obviously, Sandstrom's with the team. We don't expect him to be playing. We expect that that's more protecting his rights. And maybe he'll be the guy who's sent down and they go with Andrae as the season here unfolds. But I think if they held on to Sandstrom so far, they're either looking to deal him or they really just want to make sure they have healthy goalies, right? And if something happens to one of these goalies early in the year, right, they feel a lot more comfortable with Felix Sandstrom in there than calling up Cal Peterson and removing depth from the Phantoms, who we'll talk a little bit about them too. All right, before we get into our next two, I guess, segments, just want to remind everybody who's still listening to like and subscribe. Again, a humongous help for us if you can subscribe our video, go to iTunes or Spotify to give us a rating. Definitely want to get our iTunes ratings up. We have 4 out of 5 stars right now. Would love to get to 4.5 stars. So if you guys can do that, that would be an amazing help. And again, hit the bell for updates on YouTube. You'll get notifications of our videos as soon as they go up. All right, let's go for Phantoms update. I really just want to talk about stats. The Phantoms did have a big win the other night. They won 5-2, and there's been some big performances. The first one, which I think is really interesting because I think it puts the Flyers in a really kind of weird place of what to do with this guy. But Tanner Laczynski is definitely dominating at the AHL level, which we kind of expected. He has 3 points in 2 games, 1 goal, 2 assists. He did score a game winner as well. And then Cooper Maroody's got 2 goals, 1 assist. No surprise there. He's already been a really good player at the AHL level, but again, they're the same age. So, you look at Laczynski, there's a good chance that he's going to stay down there all season. But Allison has not had a point yet in either of the 2 games. I haven't watched the games personally. I've only seen kind of highlights and stuff like that. I haven't had a chance yet. But what do you think about Laczynski kind of, showing a good showing at the minor league?
I think it's an encouraging sign, right? Like there's 2 ways a player could take it, especially at his age.
He's got a good attitude.
Yeah, right. Like he could have took it as, I'm going down to the AHL again. I couldn't make the NHL roster again, essentially. Like, what does this mean for my career, my NHL future, right? And that could be a really, demeaning thing, essentially, for a player of his age right now, because he is in that make or break kind of territory in that window where, if he doesn't cement himself as an NHL guy in the next couple seasons here, he's probably going to be an NHL player for likely the potentially rest of his career. So it's a big year for him to just, even though he got sent down, let me put that behind me, try to play as best as I can, be as much of an impact as I can. So when there is an injury, the Flyers look at it and say, well, should we call a young guy up? Or, Tanner Laczynski is actually really showing that he could be a great option for us on the 4th line, right? Or, just to fill in potentially because, he's handling himself like a professional. He's putting up points. And he's always had a little bit of underrated aspects to his game just in terms of offensive production, right? I think there's always been a little bit more there. We've been trying to see at the higher level. So I think for Laczynski, it's definitely a good sign. Like I said, I haven't had a chance to see the game, so I can't really comment on Allison's play. It's definitely possible he's playing well. It just hasn't been able to get on the score sheet. It's not points aren't the only thing that matters. Other habits of the game too are really important. So we'll see how it kind of progresses for both of them. But I definitely wouldn't be surprised just if Laczynski continues this type of play. Depending on what injury it is, if he does get called up here, it could definitely happen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's always possible. But we'll see what the depth is like with the Flyers as things move forward. We already know kind of what Tortorella has decided with him. So
I think too, though, if it's like, for example, if it's an injury to a 4th line guy, his chances of getting called up significantly skyrocket versus Travis Konecny's out. Like,
right.
who do we call up to replace him? You know what I mean?
Totally agree with that. And A guy who could get a call up in that scenario, who already scored his first goal, is Alexis Gendron. He had a nice one the other night. Kind of caught his team, or caught the opponent sleeping a little bit, and was able to score his first professional goal. And he is playing top line as well
Yeah,
for the Phantoms, and that's not really that surprising. But it's really, I mean, again, he's 19, he turns 20 at the end of December. So to score one goal in one game just to get started, I mean, the kid
pretty good.
continues to defy the odds of a seventh round pick. And I love this stuff. I love seeing, late round picks kind of showing more than anybody expected.
Well, I mean, it's looking like even if Gendron ends up being nothing but an AHL player and a really good one in terms of like an AHL scorer, a seventh round pick becoming that for you, like that's a win for the Flyers. So for him to even become anything more than that at the NHL level, like it's a complete home run
Yep.
for a seventh rounder. And like you said, right, like the kid just knows how to score. He knows where to be to get these opportunities, right? He's in the right position again on that kind of breakaway goal to even be able to get that chance to go on the breakaway, and then he roofs the top shelf. So he has the finishing ability 100%. It's
Yep.
just the other parts of his game, obviously, that Ian LePerriere and the staff and they're going to want to work on to get him ready for the NHL levels. That's game off the puck. Being able to position yourselves in those board battles, obviously gaining strength, only being a 19-year-old, right? So these are all things that he's going to have to work on. But if he continues to score as he's been at every level, don't be surprised, to maybe see him get a couple of games near the end of the season once the Flyers kind of move some guys off the roster, do the trade deadline and things like that. There's always, opportunities for younger guys around that time. So I would definitely not be surprised. And it's going to be interesting to kind of monitor Gendron, just see how he continues here. And then I think there was another guy we wanted to get into as well, Sam Tuomaala, right, Yuri?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I was actually going to reverse it with the next guy we had on here. So yeah, Tuomaala also had his first goal in the previous game. Another guy that I think maybe he's even the most likely to get that first call up, especially in that top nine with how much Torts liked him. He already gets his first goal, one goal in two games. I love the way this kid skates. I love his size. He filled out quite a bit since we last saw him. And I think he's a guy who will have growing interest as the season goes on. Obviously, there's still Elliot Denoyer. He hasn't had a point yet, but again, that doesn't reflect on the way the organization views him. But yeah, Tuomaala with his first goal and looking good, and you love to see it.
Yeah, Tuomaala I think is an interesting one because a lot of the fan base was just so down on him right after what happened with being sent to like even below the minor leagues almost in the Finnish league,
Like
right?
their
He wasn't even.
juniors. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So like that's not something you ever want to see with a prospect that's getting selected in the second round. Like
Yeah.
you would want to see him dominating, the Finnish league or the SM Liga versus being in the junior league of the minor leagues essentially
Hmm.
of that structure there. But it just shows, right, that sometimes adversity can be a key in a player's development. Obviously, things didn't go the way that he wanted after being drafted. But he's been able to really turn it around. Like he had a great bounce back year last season. And being around Sammy Kapanen a lot, I believe that's something that was mentioned that the Flyers kind of said that they wanted Kapanen to kind of keep an eye on him and help him through his season last year. I think that's probably was something that had a big benefit, right? Like if you're a young player and you see a guy like Sammy Kapanen, who's a really good NHL player, taking an interest in you and following up with you and kind of helping you with any questions that you might have about your game, that could probably bring a lot of confidence to you. And just knowing that, if something happens and I'm unsure about it, I have a guy like Kapanen I can rely on that's here to kind of help me and is, basically was by the Flyers kind of told to focus on Tuomaala. So it just shows, at least for Tuomaala, he probably felt like the organization was really prioritizing him and what he thinks that he can bring. So I think that probably just gives him a whole newfound level of confidence that the team believes in me. They really think that I have something, and that probably helps him bounce back and then also kind of have such a really strong camp here. And I thought he had a great camp and was one of the more noticeable guys, even on the power play. I thought he was making a lot of good plays, just puck retrievals, things like that. So I think he'll certainly be an option that we could see down the line here, this season, just depending on the injuries, how things unfold, after the trade deadline, who might get moved. all those types of things. But
Yeah, for sure. And then the last guy we'll highlight is Adam Yinning. We brought him up earlier. He did have a very nice shorthanded goal
yeah,
the other night. He also had 6 shots on net in that game. And for a defensive defenseman, that's very impressive to see. With how high the team is on this guy, again, they won that game 5-2. With how high they are on this guy, it's really exciting to see. Because the guy can move, the guy can hit. He's got really good size at the NHL level, and we were always talking about Ronnie Attard, but it might be Adam Yinning, who's kind of that first call up, that waiver exemption player. So, it's interesting to see. Obviously, it'll be Emil Andrae if he gets sent back down, but Adam Yinning is something this team doesn't have enough of right now, which is ironically to say, but a young defensive defenseman with some upside, somebody who looks like he could be better than Robert Haig was for this team. So yeah, what do you think about Yinning with the 6 shots on net and the shorty?
the shorty's impressive because typically you're just not going to see a defenseman even being able to get up there and get that chance. So that's good on him for the Phantoms and just to make something like that work. And then also just being able to finish, because when you're not in those situations often, how often, like other than in practice, when is Adam Yinning working on his breakaway skills, right? Like he's usually probably not going to have a breakaway opportunity in games. So for him to finish on something like that just shows, right? Like there's obviously talent and offensive talent to his game that maybe a lot of people might have not, been aware of. And 6 shots on goal for any defenseman is great, as you mentioned. So I think it's encouraging signs for Yinning to start. And I thought he was really solid in the preseason. He brings a physical element. So if you're a Flyers team that's kind of lacking that physicality and kind of that style of play outside of a Ristolainen, I mean, you do have Sealer and Stahl, but they're more bottom pairing options where I think Yinning would be an option where, maybe it would be bottom pairing, but obviously the Flyers' ultimate goal would be for him to be, top 4 potentially, like that 4th defenseman for you who can really be solid defensively, solid in the PK. So I think if his solid play continues, like, and there's some sort of injury, I could definitely see him. I could definitely see him, get a call up there. I like the thumbs up. You're
I have no idea
with,
where that even came from.
it just means you agree with my statement, so we're good to go. I guess
it. Maybe that's the computer reading my head. I have no idea how that even happened. I
that
was
was
like
fun,
looking
though.
at it. I was like, what the heck is
I
that?
saw your reaction. I'm like, that's awesome.
All right. That was weird. Yeah, totally agree. All right, so let's go into just the overall prospects updates. We don't need to go through a bunch of players. We did it last time. I don't think we need to go through everybody, but we have 4 names that we're going to talk about. And the first one is one that is just lightning hot right now. Just coming off a hat trick. Denver Barkey playing for the London Knights. In 8 games, he has 7 goals and 6 assists. He's a +8 in those games. I mean, talk about hitting the ground running. Right? Like you're talking about 1.63 points per game in the OHL for a guy who was taken, not in the top 60 even. I was saying it in preseason. I think you agreed with me. This is a guy who, might end up being a lot better than people anticipate. He is a fun player to watch. He's scoring a ton of goals.
Really smart on the ice. Just knows where to
again,
be.
yeah, this point production, screams late first round pick, middle first round pick at the OHL level. I'm not saying that, he's going to be a star at the NHL level. We don't really know, but I still believe with the guy who's physically under mature and the fact that he's producing at this rate with the London Knights, I mean, I hope he can keep it up because he is going to make a name for himself.
Well, you can see the size was a big factor, like in why he dropped. But even in the preseason, right, you saw him like making plays in some games, playing NHL talent, and they obviously gave him the extra game too, like other than the New Jersey game, they gave him that
Point hope.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, exactly. So he got comparisons to Braden Point. He said himself when I interviewed him at the draft, he compares himself to Point. That's kind of the game he wants to model after. Obviously, that's like the best case scenario. We're not saying that he's going to be Braden Point. Even if he's a fraction of what Braden Point is as a 3rd round pick, that's a win for the Flyers, right? Mm-hmm. So just the fact that you could see the skill in his game, translates so early, and you can see even in the preseason that he just has the smarts about him and he knows where to go on the ice. The hockey sense is there. Totally. It's crazy, right? In last 4 games, obviously he has the hat trick last game, but in 4 games, his last 4 years, 7 goals, 3 assists, +9. which is crazy. And
That's crazy.
overall, in OHL scoring right now, he's tied for third with 13 points. And the only two ahead of him are Luke Misa with 14 and Adrian Misaljevic with 14. So he's right there for top end scoring, essentially. So it's just encouraging stuff to see from Barkey. Like to see your third round pick basically in the top five of OHL scoring, like that's not something that you're going to really expect of a guy. So for the Flyers, it's a
Braden
win-win.
Point.
Yeah,
Braden.
for the Flyers, it's a win-win situation. And I actually wanted to bring this tweet up from Alexander Appleyard.
Yeah,
It's
please
something
do.
I mentioned. I mentioned this in the past when we had our episodes with Steve, kind of breaking the draft down, right? Like, so, Smart Scouting that I believe Appleyard is associated with had Denver Barkey number 38th overall in their rankings, and he went 95th. He was over a point per game in his draft year this past season. That's regular season and playoffs, and he did not get regular PP time. Played really well at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. High tempo, great forechecker, gritty, mobile, plays all four positions. So center, left wing, right wing. That was a big thing that Briere and Flair were saying they targeted when they drafted him. The fact that he can play
Hmm.
all positions at such a young age, that's just a valuable thing to have in a player, right? And that was one of the things that I kind of looked into after he got drafted. Just his scouting report said that he's a guy that always has his feet moving, really high motor player. And that's something that you want, and especially with a guy that lacks size, or you have to be able to, be tenacious, be willing to get in on the forecheck despite your lack of size, get it to the front of the net, and those are all things that he doesn't seem to have a problem doing. And like I was saying, like on our previous episodes with Steve, like I even mentioned that Spot Scouting had him at 38th. He got drafted 95th. I believe Bob McKenzie's list had him in the 50s, and he was drafted 95th. Craig Button, I believe, had him in the 50s as well. So these are, guys in Button and in McKenzie who usually people are looking at their lists and kind of taking a lot of that into consideration in terms of drafting and where prospects should have been
Sure.
selected. So to see him drop that much, I think the Flyers found a steal here. Just and seeing the production that he's had so far kind of just points to that, in my opinion. So
Yeah, and his first OHL season, and he would have been 16, 17. He had 15 points in 53 games. This past year in his draft year, he had 59 points in 61 games, and now he's an over point per game pace. That is very similar to Braden Point, a
yeah,
guy who, again, these physically undermature players, and even Morgan Frost kind of landed under that, right? When he was kind of drafted by the Flyers at the end of the first round, he didn't have like lights out points, and then his draft plus 1 year, he was lighting things up in the OHL. So, really good to see, and let's hope he keeps it up because we could use a
yeah,
steal like that, like a guy who could potentially be a star player. I don't want to get ahead of myself. He's still going to be at least a couple years away from the
yeah.
NHL,
Still
most
a young
likely.
guy,
But
exactly.
that's huge progress to go from 15 points in a season to 60 points in a season to potentially,
Yeah,
90 points, 100 points in a season. That's the type of progress that, when you see that in a prospect, you can't help but think NHL player, like
yeah.
at the very least. So for a third round pick, it'd be a huge home run. Uh, the next guy we want to pick up is talk about is his teammate, Oliver Bonk. Obviously, our first round pick from this past year. This season, he's a +3 and he has 6 assists in 8 games. Again, not a goal yet in the season, kind of continuing his trend from the end of last season, but still 6 assists in 8 games for a defenseman. That's a really good start. I want to see him score some goals, but his team is winning. He is playing well. And for a defenseman, that's a really good point per game average at 0.75.
Yeah, exactly right. Like anytime a defense was getting close to a point per game, that's a good thing. And especially for him when that was probably the biggest thing that people want to see him improve upon, right? Like they know
The
that
offensive game.
his defensive acumen's there. He's really positionally sound for his age. And we kind of saw that in development camp, rookie camp, some of the preseason games. Like he just has good positioning in his own end, active stick, good gap control and all that. And pretty good size for his age too, right? Even being a young
Yep.
guy. So that'll even he'll even be able to add on more muscle and more size as kind of he goes along here. But that's I think what the Flyers probably really want to see, and that's probably what Bonk would say himself that he probably wants to improve upon the most is his offensive game. You know, being able to outlet the puck more efficiently, transition the puck up ice more efficiently, carry the puck when that option presents itself, and obviously get the goal scoring and the assists in there as well. So I think if we continue to see him get close to a point a game as a defenseman in the OHL as the season progresses here, that's just great signs for him kind of taking the next step with his offensive game. So it'll be something really good to monitor. But so far, so good for a start.
Oh yeah.
Can't ask for more. So.
Oh yeah, well said. And then let's go into our final two, the big names on the list. The one that we all know. So Cutter Gauthier still only has that one goal, but he did hit the post and that came from Vasily, hit the post in his second game. So he did come close again. College hockey is a little bit different with scoring, obviously, than the OHL. It's a lot tougher league to score in. But I would expect that this kid's going to start lighting it up soon. The fact that he didn't score last game is honestly kind of surprising. And we'll have more updates on him as we move forward. But he's a huge part of that team and playing center. So I believe he's going to be walking onto the Flyers when he's NHL ready. And at the end of this year, it's kind of a little bit different because it'll depend on where the Flyers are, where the Phantoms are. I could see him starting with the Phantoms at the end of the season, getting some pro time at the end, but I do see him kind of starting with the Flyers next year. So, good to see that he's still getting chances, and he was a hair away from scoring his second of the season.
Yeah, no, it's definitely really good to see. I think one thing to note for Gauthier is that he's not playing with any of Will Smith, Gabe Perreault, or Ryan Leonard. They've kept that line together. So he's playing with guys that are, I think he's playing with some of the same guys that he played with last season, but they're a lot less offensively talented than those three. So that could affect him too, just in terms of creating scoring opportunities. So I'm interested to see, how it goes from this season. I think he's going to have a monster year production wise. I do wonder, if they end up switching things up and they get one of those kind of more offensive minded guys like a Perreault, well, probably not Will Smith because he's a center, but like a Perreault or a Ryan Leonard on his line eventually here. I'm sure it will happen. It's a hockey season. There's always shifts in lineup. So
yeah, and Will Smith has 1 assist in 2 games. Ryan Leonard has 1 assist in 2 games. I don't even see Jacob Perreault here. Maybe he has him. Oh, here he is. He has no points. Yeah. Right. So again, he's tied for third on the team in points and 1 point. And then Andrew Gassau and Jack Malone, who are both older, they're the ones producing points, but also
NHL so picks. Malone's the one that Gauthier's playing with, riding shotgun win, and I believe that they played together last year. So yeah,
I imagine that'll change as the season evolves. And
Probably.
We already saw Gauthier do very well against men at the NHL level, so I have zero concerns there. And let's get into our final prospect. And this is the big name that everybody is following every single thing he does, and understandably so. As we record this today, Matvei Michkov had his 6th goal of the season. That leaves him at 13 points in 13 games. Really
12.
In 12 games, right? Because he only got 3 minutes with Ska St. Petersburg. So he continues his above point per game pace, scoring his 6th goal of the season. He's a +3 on the year with 8 penalty minutes. Let's be honest, the kid is just freaking lights out. And again, if he even finishes a point per game pace, that is breaking the records of all of the previous. And again, I look more at point per game versus total points. Now, people might love the total points thing, but that doesn't matter to me as much as how many games played and the fact that he's still above a point per game pace, where his team, when he scored today, they were down 4-0. So again, it's not like his team is lighting it up and he's not. He is essentially the biggest play driver on his team, and he's still the youngest guy there. So by the end of the year, I do expect his point production to continue to rise and to be around 1 point or point per game, or if not even above it, by the time he's done.
Yeah, Michkov, it's good to see him produce after coming off that illness. I think he was sick with a cold or something along those lines.
I should have
mentioned
that, right.
He's coming back in, right? And he's getting right back on the score sheet, kind of where he left off. 13 points in 13 games, as we said, really 13 and 12. I don't really count a 3-minute game of ice time. Great opportunity to actually get any, scoring in. Yeah. So it's not really fair to kind of put that game in there. But nonetheless, point a game exactly right now if you look at the official stats. And I mean, Sochi lost 5-2 to Spartak, but he was still a bright spot for them. So that's always an encouraging sign, right? To see a young player shine in a game where a team, isn't playing the best, because sometimes that's not where
Those
you're
are the
going to
games where you
see.
lose them. Yeah.
Exactly. Those are the games
Yeah.
where a
Great
young player
point.
can become invisible, and they might have more of a difficult time producing or being noticeable. So it shows that doesn't play a guy like Michkov, which isn't really surprising considering his skill level and talent overall. I have a couple stats here for Michkov. I'm just going to fire away.
Please do.
This one's from Byron Bader on Twitter, so shout out to him. But Michkov is pacing to have the highest U20 KHL equivalency ever, and is beating second place guys Yashin, Ovechkin, Kuznetsov by up 35% in terms of his point production right now.
It's
So
ridiculous.
there's more to it. So in his D+1 season, he's got so far 1.0 point per game average, whereas Alexei Yashin has 0.81 in his D+1 season. Evgeny Kuznetsov 0.73 and Alex Ovechkin 0.70. So he's at 1.0 and considerably higher than some of the best
Playing on a
Russian
bad
players.
team.
Yeah, playing on a
Also,
bad team, but some of the
well,
most
media
talented
average team.
yeah, but
Average team.
some of the most talented Russian players that we've seen, in the last 20, 30 years here, and Yashin, Kuznetsov, Ovechkin.
If
So
if he's as good as Kucherov, it's a humongous win. If he's better than
yeah,
Kucherov, that blows everybody's mind. Again, let's give it time. I hate putting so much pressure on an 18-year-old, but the kid is going, he doesn't
he
stop. He's a
continues to
machine.
pro- he
He's a
continues to
machine.
produce. He continues to produce, and I
Offensive
mean, like,
machine.
you can't ignore the fact that he's outproducing, elite level talents at the NHL level at the same age when they were in the KHL. You just can't ignore stuff like
No,
that,
you
right? Like,
you cannot. The fact
and
that we got him at 7 is still
I
crazy.
can't believe that he dropped that far. I mean, like we said, right? Like, if it was up to us, if we were Anaheim, we would have picked the number two.
Yeah.
That's just, if you look at the talent level, right? Like, his talent is just off the charts. He's not, like we said, Connor Bedard, otherworldly, but the difference is not all that far.
I don't even know if
In
there will be a difference, to be honest with you, offensively. I really
Yeah,
don't know at the end of the day, because for everything Bedard did, Michkov is doing the exact same thing on the Russian side, right?
yeah, exactly. And even at similar tournaments, right? Like, I believe Holinka Gretzky Cup, where him and Michkov both attended. Like, Michkov was the MVP of that tournament like 2, 3 years ago. You just never saw them get to go head to head ever again.
He outscored Bedard by like 5 goals or something like
Yeah,
that.
and that or something like that. Like,
He had 13 goals.
if you go back and listen to prior episodes, like
Yeah.
in the summer, like, we have all the stats outlined. I don't have them in front of me about how much points he scored that Holinka Gretzky Cup when him and Bedard both played a couple of years ago. But he was the MVP of that tournament, and you can't ignore that. And I think a lot of people forget, because usually you like to place
Oh, he had
prospects in.
it was 8 goals in 5 games. That's what he had, I think.
Oh, okay, really good.
I think that's what he or
Either
no, no, it
way,
was I'm sorry, it was 12 goals in 7 games.
okay. Either way, right? Like, you're looking at it, he's producing a lot of goals, but I'm saying, like, if you don't have prospects going head to head, a lot of the time you'll get forgotten in that conversation, right? Like, you never got to see Michkov go head to head with Bedard, whereas usually in most years you're going to see the top two prospects at the World Juniors play each other, and then that's a big topic of conversation, and it's a big factor in where a guy gets drafted. Him not being able to play in those World Juniors last year, you can guarantee impacted where he got selected.
Yeah,
It
we wouldn't
shouldn't be that. It shouldn't be that way, but that's just how it is in the
his
prospect and the scouting world. So
yeah, his misfortune led to our fortune. So,
pretty
and again,
much,
he wants to play here, which is huge. Like,
yeah.
he's excited to come to Philly. That's awesome. All right, that's all we got for today. Anything you want to tell people about? Any updates or anything like that? Anything you're working on?
Just gonna have feature articles coming out for Flyers Nitty Gritty as we go along throughout the season. I'm gonna try to get just pinpoint certain things surrounding the team that are interesting here, and try to get some insightful articles out for you all to read. So appreciate all your support with us. Like, we definitely notice it, and we're going to keep trying to bring you as much as content as we can as the season goes along, and just as much insight as we can. We appreciate you all, and thanks for sticking with us throughout everything.
Yeah, well said, dude. Again, just to reiterate what Vasily just said, thank you all for listening, for commenting, for following along. The season's going to be ramping up. The Phillies are playing right now downstairs. So I can hear my roommate screaming at the television, which he always does. So I'm going to check that out after this. But again, definitely when baseball season
Hey,
ends.
they're up 3-0 right now, so let's
There you
go
go.
Phils.
There we go. So I'm really excited to see, kind of the engagement as we move forward, and as, baseball wraps up, and, football is obviously going to ramp up. But we know everybody's paying attention to the Phillies right now. Totally get it. I'm watching all the games too. But yeah, again, just reminder to please like, subscribe, share if you can, hit the bell for reminders. Go to iTunes and Spotify to follow us there. And if you give us ratings, that would be huge as well. And we love you guys. We love the engagement. We love that you guys are following along, and all the positivity you guys send us, and the engagements on Twitter and everything like that. You guys have been amazing. So thank you so much. Again, we love you very, very much. And remember, always stay British.